So the 12, all the apostles, and a very large group of 500 or more. And Paul said this comes from very early material. Okay, so I'm going to map out some territory here, and then I'm going to show you a little different. I'm going to give you two arguments tonight. The first one's not quite as tight because the data I'm going to use are going to be a little broader. And you can argue it with anybody. In fact, most apologists use this argument, the other one. The one that I call minimal fact. It's starting to come in. If you look on websites, this is becoming the most popular way to argue for the resurrection today. But I'm going to do both with you, so we can be practical here and give you a couple ways to get there. All right, I'm going to start like this. Let me walk down here, and let me call this ground zero, okay? That's creation down there, 2012 down there. This is ground zero. This is the date of Jesus' death. Most scholars say 30 AD. Next most popular date, 33. So, it's hard to know for sure. It's hard to be dogmatic. Well, that's why I call this ground zero. I'm interested in how many years there are from and to this event. Because when you're doing historiography, when you're studying history, secular, religious, principles are the same. When you do historiography, you want as early sources as possible, and you want eyewitness sources if possible, but very little history in the ancient world was established by eyewitness testimony. Very little. And yet it's an important rule that the scholars are looking for. They just know they don't have it very often. So we go to and from this point. Now if you ask the average Christian, let's say, how would you evidence these events right here? What's the best way to get there? And at least up until recently, the most popular approach has been to do something like this. Well, I'd start with the Gospel of Mark. Now I'm going to use critics' dates, all right? Because the critics' dates are not that much later than evangelical dates. And you'll be able to see that even by using their dates, that will not upset our argument at all. So I'll do this for them. So the whole minimal facts argument is an attempt to allow their data, not because they're right, but to use their data to show them that even on their data, the most important event in history can be established. That's the point, is to take their case. So you don't spend all day arguing about whose case is better. You say, we can prove the case with your facts. So, their data. Mark is going to be dated about plus 40 after the death of Jesus. So 30 plus 40, about 70 AD. Could be 65, could be 75, according to critics, but about plus 40. They're going to date Matthew at about plus 80, Luke at about plus 85. Evangelicals put these books in the 60s, so they're about 20 years later, but it changes nothing. So Luke at about 65, that's the 65, 55, 55 and 30, 85, and everybody puts John at about 95 or plus 65. Are you all with me? Mark at about plus 40, Matthew at about plus 50 or 80 AD. Luke at about 55 or plus 85. John, the latest, 65, which is 65 plus 30, 95 AD. And a lot of times critics will say, these books are just too late to make a difference. And when you hear that, just, if you're dialoguing with them, just smile real big. Let them know they're not bothering you at all, but you really question what they're saying. This stuff's too late to make a difference. I had a big debate in April with one of the new atheists, Michael Shermer. He's the editor of Skeptic magazine, and, note, an ex-evangelical. And we were debating, and he got to pick two extra guys. See, we were the main debaters all day on Friday. Then Saturday, we each brought two more people in, so there were 6 of us dialogue the next day. And he got to bring two fellows in. And one of the fellows he brought in was another well-known new atheist. His name is Victor Stinger. He's a physicist, and he's written some. He's pretty rough on Christians. Let's put it that way. And Michael and I had debated the night before. The topic was, is there an afterlife? A little different topic, but the resurrection did come up. And the next day, Vic and I were up on the stage. He just got done giving a lecture, and he said, the Gospels are way too late to make a difference. Are you kidding me? 65 years later? Well, I mean, why can't we talk about 40 years later? Why take the latest one? But, you know, no difference. 65 years later, it's garbage. And he gave a bunch of facts that I don't know where he got these. Students in the crowd were saying, something this list of things are off Wikipedia or something. And I got up there, and I said, okay, let me ask you a question, because we were dialoguing. So let me ask you a question. Do you think we know a lot about Alexander the Great? And he said, yeah, a lot about Alexander the Great. I mean, think about some of the things we know. 33 years old when he dies, he took over the world, fastest time ever, most disciplined army ever to come about. He marches east from Macedonia, north of Greece, all the way over to India, takes over the known world, because like I said, the most disciplined forces there are, dies of a fever, and his four of his generals divided up his empire. Yeah, we know a fair amount about him. When did we get that data about Alexander? Ancient history, I guess. Okay. 5 contemporaries wrote about Alexander. 5. None of their works exist today. You can't read any of them. The earliest source for Alexander, if ground zero down there is Alexander's death, about 330 BC. 300 years later, you're going to be getting all the way down here, different timeline, but you're going to get all the way down here to when the new, the time of Christ begins. 300 years. And that's our first source. Our best sources for Alexander, Plutarch and Arian. And if that's ground zero down there, with a shorter, you'll see, this is a shorter leash here than it is for the New Testament. Because we're already 300 years after Alexander right there. The latest gospel is 65. The two most popular sources for Alexander 425 to 450 later. 425 to 450 later. And I said, do we know a lot about Alexander? Yeah. Really? From 300 to 450 years later. Well, yeah, but the Gospels aren't trustworthy because there's miracles in the Gospel. Really? Do you know how Plutarch's Alexander starts? It is said that Alexander was born of a virgin, and I guess his dad was the son of Jupiter, something like that, or he was. I have to go back and look at Plutarch. Isn't that a little loftier than, well, you guys have a virgin birth? Yeah, you eliminated all the sources. You said they were too late. And you're going to use a source from 450 and throw ours out from plus 40 to plus 65. Here's another one. The Caesar who's on the throne with Jesus Christ. So I can go back down here. The Caesar is named Tiberius. He dies just a few years after Jesus. So they overlap very nicely. We have 4 major sources for Tiberius. Pretty good. 4 Gospels. All right, let's go head to head. The earliest source for Tiberius is contemporary. Beat that. You know Mark's plus 40. Maybe you want to go with the evangelical date and argue plus 30 or 32 or something like that. But his is contemporary. But this is the worst of the four sources for Tiberius. This is the worst one. The next best source for Tiberius is the best one. It's the best. We're back on the New Testament timeline now. And the best source for Tiberius Tacitus, about 118 AD, or plus 80. The next one, Suetonius, 5 years later, plus 85. And the fourth source, Dio Cassius, I'd have to walk out there and go through that wall and keep going. This Dio Cassius is plus 180. Four best sources for Tiberius. Now, yes, he's got a contemporary source, but it's the weakest of the sources. It's the weakest. And the best are plus 80 and plus 85. Our worst is John at plus 65, if you're only comparing time differences. How about total sources? There are about 10 sources for Tiberius. There are a lot more than that for Jesus. In fact, we have about 12 non-Christian sources for Jesus alone. So just on common grounds here, to do history the way you do history, we have an excellent starting point with Jesus. Excellent starting point. So this is one way to go after it. I call this method the reliability method. Because you want to argue that the Gospels are in the right place at the right time to present reliable records. That's the way, up until the last 10 years, most apologists have argued. And you can still bring this argument about. All right, starting now, I'm going to use the minimal facts argument, and